ladies and gentlemen. Welcome into Snow The Goalie, the only Flyers podcast, the People's Podcast, Players Podcast, Prognosticators Podcast, Pedialyte Podcast, the only Flyers podcast. We're back. It is the end of May. We are pretty much done the month of May. We're less than a month from the NHL draft. The Flyers are in the mix. It feels like every potential free agent, every potential trade target, the Flyers are rumored to be involved in. So we have the ultimate insider, Anthony SanFilippo, here to break all that down. We have an absolute beaut of a human being over on the right side. That's none other than Chris Therien. Bundy is here, and I'm just here for the hilarity. Welcome in. It's been a long time, but it's been a good time. It's been a good time away. Now we come back re-energized, refreshed, and ready to break it all down. Gents, how we doing?
Well, the first thing I want to say before we say hello to everybody, it's been a minute, right? Is Joe Papel, our good friend, wanted to know who was late this morning, and nobody was late. We were actually all here on time. The only reason we started late though is because Russ is in the middle of lunch, and so he had a big sandwich in his mouth, chewing away.
Nope.
What were you eating?
Fake news, SanFilippo. I do my meal prepping. This is a honey teriyaki chicken and rice.
Whatever it was.
That I prepped.
It was a mouthful of food.
No, in fairness, Bundy and I were kind of happy. We actually did like a little bit of a pre-production show today, a little pre-production meeting before you got here. So we're all aligned on what's going on. And Ant, I do have the other thing that you sent me directly also pulled up for later as well. So we'll have to remember to get to that. Now, I need the people to keep us honest here. And Bundy, I'm going to throw this to you in a second. I need people to keep us honest. So we have a ton of stuff to get to. We don't have a show sheet. So if we forget anything along the way, I'll rely on the commenters here to be the ones to kind of keep us honest here. But we want to get into the rumors around the Flyers. So that includes the names like Marco Rossi, Mitch Marner, which I think is very clearly not even worth a discussion, but we can have that real quickly. There's the Jake Oettinger of it all. After what happened with Pete DeBoer last night, Oettinger getting benched after 2 quick goals in a decisive game in the Western Conference Finals. We have a Tyson Foerster re-signing. Ian Laperierre no longer the Phantoms coach. There's a lot more. So make sure, if you're in the comments, watching live on YouTube, X, and Facebook, you keep us honest here. And if we forget something along the way, make sure you start screaming at us in the comments. Bundy, I didn't get to ask, though, how are you? And are you refreshed, re-energized? You've got a wedding coming up here.
I do.
In less than a month as well. So that's pretty damn exciting.
I got a big wedding, yeah, and it's going to dominate the month of June for sure. I'm excited about that. My oldest daughter getting married, Isabella, so we're excited about that. And I've been watching the playoffs every single night. Really paid attention this year. It's been an odd playoff. It really has in a lot of ways. The first 2 rounds were just unbelievable overtime games. Crazy finishes where teams had 2-goal leads with 30 seconds left and they were blowing them and whatever else went on. But I've really enjoyed watching what we're watching. And I would tell you right now, I would never have bet a dime that these same two teams would have been back in the Stanley Cup final. And obviously, Russ, our fantasy draft would suggest that we had no interest in either of these teams going to the Stanley Cup final. But you know what? It's going to be interesting again. And I don't even know how Edmonton got by Los Angeles when you start back at the beginning of the series. Like we thought LA was going to be a team that could maybe go for a deep run, and then their wheels came off. But I'm enjoying it, and I'm glad the NHL is going to have a chance to end this the game this year, the 7-game series, a lot shorter than it did last year, where it went almost until the end of June. So some crazy stuff going on. Yeah,
but you know what though, Bundy, on that. I understand that there pretty much has to be an extra travel day because of how far of a trip it is from Sunrise, Florida to Edmonton, Alberta. Like, I get it. But they did screw them over a little bit in the middle of the series. And if you look at the schedule, I think it's between games 4 and 5, I want to say, or maybe it's between 5 and 6. There's only one day and there's a travel from one city to the other. And so it's an 8 p.m. start. And I think it's game 5 in Edmonton. And then you have to fly all the way across the country to Florida and then on a Saturday night is game 6, or vice versa. Maybe it's 4 and 5. I forget when it is, but it goes Thursday, Saturday in 2 different cities. And I thought that was just unnecessary. Like,
stupid question, but I didn't look at the schedule yet for the final. But who's the home team? Is it
Edmonton has home ice?
Okay.
But the thing of it is that they gave them off time in between the games in the cities. So like there's no back-to-back. There's even 2 days off in Florida. So you play game 3, have 2 days off, and then it's game 4, and then 1 day off to fly out to, I think that's what it is, and then 1 day off to fly out to Edmonton for game 5. I think that's what it is. And that doesn't make any sense to me. It's like, why would you have 2 days off in the same city, but only 1 day off between one city and the next? I just think the NHL screwed that one up.
Yeah, I agree with that, Anthony. That's kind of bizarre. Yeah.
And I know that they don't want to go up against the NBA finals. I get it, but which is why they're not playing on any of the games on Sunday. But come on.
The NBA can I just say, as the resident NBA guy, the conference finals sucked. I think it's actually interesting, guys. I'd like to.
So did they pretty much sucked in the NHL?
Well, that's what I was about to say. It's weird because, usually you kind of get the inverse, right? Like where the NHL playoffs are maybe a little bit more competitive early on, but then the NBA playoffs get a little bit better as it goes deeper. This year is the first time I can remember that the NBA and the NHL playoffs have been sensational in the first round, and it's only gotten it's gotten worse as we've gotten farther into the playoffs. Now, this should be an incredible final, right? Like nothing like a rematch. There's nothing like putting a team that's now made it there 3 straight years in Florida going up against the best player in the world. Like, the storylines write themselves. But man, these conference finals were such a disappointment.
Yeah.
Like on one hand, I don't think I was really that disappointed in the East because I just kind of thought that Florida was on a crash course to go back. But the West, the way that especially Dallas was able to fight their way back in the first round, and the way that Dallas seemed to be able to kind of roll, and then to get to the Western Conference Final, and like, I don't know, guys, I don't know if I'd call it a choke, but like, they just seem to lose themselves. Like, Bundy, is there anything that stood out to you there that can explain what the hell happened to Dallas and like why it didn't work against Edmonton?
You know what? I think when you go back to the beginning of the playoffs, right? And you remember we were talking like at the end of the year, like look at that division, the Central Division with Winnipeg, Dallas, and Colorado, right? So we were saying there's the 2 teams that were going to finish second and third. We're going to kick the shit out of each other, right? Because that's the way it was going to be set up. So I'll be honest with you, I saw a Dallas team that's wheels just came right off. And then they had to go in and then win a second round after getting through Colorado. I think Colorado took a lot of wind out of their sails. So I just think that's what happened. They just looked like they were done. Like they looked like they were just completely out of gas. Their goaltender looked exhausted. He wasn't very good. And Dallas has got, they're another team too that's had some deep runs. Like I don't say deep, like but they've gone to a Stanley Cup final in the bubble. They've had a couple runs. They've been far more competitive than we thought. Me and Anthony used to talk during the season. Couple outsider teams that we thought could get to the conference final or the Stanley Cup was Dallas and the Los Angeles Kings. Well, LA found out pretty quick it couldn't happen, and Dallas looked like they were a team that was kind of set for destiny because I look at the 2 teams, Dallas and Edmonton, and I don't want to say outside of McDavid and Draisaitl, which would be a really stupid thing to say that Dallas is a better team. But they looked like a deeper team. The problem is when Edmonton's getting all this secondary scoring, last night when you see guys like Janmark scoring a goal and Jeff Skinner playing his second playoff game gets 1 goal in a game like that last night, it wasn't Dallas's year. But I really do feel like they were just completely fatigued, Russ. I think that's what kind of hampered Dallas's prospects down the road.
Well, while we're on Dallas, I want to get to the hottest topic, I guess, that came out of last night's game. And I actually want to throw it to the post-game press conference because I'm sure that a lot of people who are watching the show or listening to the show after the fact are aware of what was said. But we saw Oettinger get pulled after 2 goals. And on commentary, they said they really couldn't have put either of them on Oettinger. But Pete DeBoer, in what ended up being an elimination game, decided to take the very bold strategy, the bold move of pulling his goalie. Pulling a goalie, who, by the way, is owed a lot of money over a lot of years. I don't think people realize how long and how lucrative that deal is. We'll get there in a second. But Pete DeBoer pulls Jake Oettinger. And, man, if you just look at what gives you the best chance of winning, can't imagine it's that. But I do want to get to his logic because coaches, Bundy, we often ask for coaches to be honest, and we don't want the cookie-cutter answers. I want to go out to Pete DeBoer first because he gave two different reasons, two that I guess are kind of linked, of why he pulled Jake Oettinger last night, because obviously now people are going, oh, is this going to lead to a divorce in Dallas? So let's go out to Pete first.
Well, anytime you pull a goalie, there's the reasoning's always to try and spark your group. So that was the number one reason.
Hey, Bundy, I do want to ask you this really quick. The idea of sparking the bench, we know that happens a lot in the regular season. We know that that's like a really critical thing in the regular season. Is it an overrated element to this, especially in the playoffs, especially in an elimination game, or is it more desperation than anything?
It was desperation. There was a lot of it you could see. I mean, obviously when you're pulling your number one goaltender and then, for the 2 goals against, but Oettinger hasn't been, he hadn't been very good. Edmonton had gotten to him. He'd let in those 2 goals were not bad goals, but they weren't good goals either. They were front of the net. I know Perry got one. And then the second goal was Janmark that went between the legs, the wickets. That's got to be stopped, in a game like that. It was just too easy. And then they call a timeout. They pull Oettinger. They put the Smith in the net. And then all of a sudden, Jeff Skinner scores, who's, playing his second game after 15 years in the NHL. It's his second NHL playoff game, and he scores a goal, makes it 3-0. And that, Dallas fought back. But, I think that, some of the things we talk about with coaches, I appreciate the honesty to a sense. I'm not sure you can do it.
I want to get to the honesty here real quick, Bundy.
Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead. Second part of the quote, I think, is actually fucking crazy, but okay.
We had talked endlessly in this series about trying to play with the lead. And obviously we were in a 2-0 hole right away. And you know what, I didn't take that lightly and I didn't blame it all on Jake, but the reality is if you go back to last year's playoffs, he's lost 6 to 7 games to Edmonton, and we gave up 2 shots on 2 goals in an elimination game. So, it was partly to spark our team and wake them up, and partly, knowing that, status quo had not been working.
That's pretty rough. I mean, going back to the playoff precedent, I guess, of having not had success against Edmonton. I get it. Historically, he's right. There's no debating it. But that I think kind of speaks to what you're saying, Bundy, about the honesty. So I guess pick it up from there. I mean, that is certainly an honest answer. I don't know if it's one that most coaches would have given in that.
Well, I know nobody's going to like it, but I mean, what are you going to say? I mean, he's right. They were down 3-1 in the series. Not much had gone. They had a hard time playing with the lead, and when they couldn't get a lead, and then they're down 2-0, and your goalie let in both goals. You want to think, stop one of the 2 goals at least, give your team a chance, but he didn't. So. I appreciate the honesty. It's probably not going to play really well with the players in that locker room, is certainly Jake Oettinger. I don't know how upper management will feel about it, but he's spitting facts out. He was spitting facts out, to be quite honest with you, and Oettinger just wasn't that good. I mean, he's had good regular seasons. He outdueled Connor Hellebuck when they played Winnipeg in the second round, and they got through that round. But they had 2 physical rounds that they got through. And I just think that Edmonton just looked like a team that's playing with nobody thinks we're supposed to win, so let's just go out and play the kind of game and style that we're supposed to play. They're getting scoring up and down their lineup, contributions from everybody. But I going back to Pete DeBoer, I don't know how that'll be translated in the world of Dallas hockey. But he was right, and there had to be some accountability. The only problem is he didn't have a really great guy coming in to replace Jake Oettinger. Casey DeSmith is a very generic backup. So I think that's probably why a lot of people were thinking, how to take a goalie out that's gotten you this far and putting in maybe a substandard backup.
And were you surprised at all about how candid he was? Is this damage control because he knows that there's going to be a lot of pressure thrown on him as a coach, that they came up short in this game, or Is it just honesty and it kind of rings true?
Yeah, I was a little surprised by the answer, to be honest. I mean, I just you don't get a lot of those from coaches in press conferences. Sometimes a coach will say it to you one-on-one, but you don't really get that honesty. And it's fine that he puts it out there. Like I think that players will get it. I think he'll understand. I think Oettinger will, as time heals, I think he'll understand why it was said. It is what it is, man. I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, Oettinger was not good in this series. He just wasn't, and he wasn't good against Edmonton last year either. And I think Jake Oettinger is a very, very good goalie. I think he's top 5 goalie in the NHL, and he just has Edmonton's his kryptonite in a lot of ways, and it's just what it is. And it doesn't mean that you can't go out there and win a Stanley Cup with Jake Oettinger in Dallas going forward. I still think you can. I mean, he signed there long term. I mean, he's going to be the guy, right? So I think it's one of those where, okay, fine. And look, it's not the first time that a coach has in an elimination game has gone to a backup goalie. That's happened. Maybe you think about trading or taking him out in the first period. That's a little bit of a desperation move. But coaches have started backup goalies in game 5s down 3-1 or down 3-0 in a series. Like that happens all the time. So, okay, it was a short leash instead of we're going to start the backup goalie in game 5 because our starter's been knocked around for the first 4 games. I don't think there's much more to it than that.
Now I know that people are going to immediately have the reaction, and it happened last night, and there were people joking about it, and I joked, trade a 2nd-round pick and Ivan Fedotov for him. But there are people who look at the rebuild and like, what are the 3 things that people highlight the most on this team that the Flyers are going to need? They're going to need a number 1 goalie. They're going to need a number 1 center. They're going to need a number 1 defenseman. And like all of those things don't often hit the market at the same time. This is actually beautiful. God, this is a good transition. But you have potentially, I mean, you just said like a top 5 goalie is available. There's a guy that some people think is a number 1 center potentially on the market, which we'll get to in a second. But the Oettinger of it all.
What do you mean he's available?
Who? What? No. The goalie, it's an interesting thing because they're going to have to do a lot to smooth that over. And I throw out to people that, like, you're not getting Oettinger, not only because Dallas probably doesn't have the reason to trade him, but that contract is absurd in every way. $8.25 million. He is under contract at that cap hit through the 2032-2033 season. Let me ask you a question. Big, bad contract, baby.
Let me ask you a question. What's Bob's contract in Florida?
Is he getting 11, 10 and a half, 11?
How's that working out?
I mean, it's working out really well because, it was the back end of the contract for him, not the front end of the contract, right? Sure.
So you to sit there and say, "Oh, it's a terrible contract, it's a bad contract," you got to deal with it.
It's terrible. I'm just saying it's going to be hard to trade. That's going to be it's a difficult contract to trade because who are you going to be able to send back that could even make the numbers even remotely line up? Hence the joke about Fedotov. But
I will say this: if it comes down in Dallas. If it really came down to like we can't rectify this between Oettinger and DeBoer, and we have to make a change, I would bet that they would replace the coach before they replace the goalie.
For sure,
I agree.
So to me, I don't think Jake Oettinger is even a conversation. It might be a pipe dream on social media for a lot of Flyers fans because of what was said and what was happening, but I don't even think that there's a conversation there. Like he's not going to be available this offseason.
Yeah. No chance. Although all right, so we're going to finish playing out this fantasy land. Let's say Oettinger is that upset. Let's just say he's like unbelievably beside himself and goes to management and says like, this coach needs to go or I want out. I'm not saying that would happen, but like if it were to happen and Dallas says, we're going to try to make this work. And Oettinger says, I'm not interested. And he like holds out into training camp. then what? Like, if they don't make a change at head coach and they have a very salty netminder, does it put any pressure on the organization either way? Or, I mean, I don't know. I think it's just interesting. Things happen behind the scenes with teams. It would just be weird, I would have to think that he wants to stay there, but the coach is going to have to do a lot to kind of smooth this one over, I think. Now, I mentioned
probably
that's your one goal. That's your 1G, right? If you were ever to hit the market, that's the number one guy. But 1C, there's a name that's been bantied about quite a lot here, Anthony. And there are people who seem to believe that the Flyers are interested in one Marco Rossi from Minnesota. Now, I don't know if people think that Chuck Fletcher is still the GM of this team. Chuck Fletcher, who loves Minnesota. But is it realistic for the Flyers? Do they have the assets if they wanted to go out and acquire him? Do they have the cap flexibility to give him what has reportedly been an ask of somewhere around 7 years, $7 million AAV? Would it be good business, bad business? Where you at? What are you hearing?
So first things first, let's put it this way. When players become available, and in this case, Marco Rossi would be a player that Minnesota lets every other team in the league know, hey, we're probably interested in listening to what people would offer for this guy if we were going to move him. Of course, every team, every general manager should check in, and I can tell you that the Flyers were one of those teams. Danny Briere did his job. He checked in. There were no conversations, however, between the Flyers and the Wild, between Rossi and Bill Guerin. I mean, between Danny Briere and Bill Guerin on what the trade compensation would be. Okay. As far as the Flyers' interest in Marco Rossi, there's some. But it's not like, oh my God, this is the guy we got to go out and get, and we're going to trade whatever Minnesota's looking for to get this guy. He's a smaller center. The Flyers, as you're going to do later in the show, we're going to talk about size being a thing and being a factor for teams when they compete for a Stanley Cup. He's a smaller center. Probably at his ceiling is a 2C. I think more than likely long-term he's 3C, Marco Rossi. And the reports that were out there were coming out of Minnesota's camp. We're not coming from the Flyers, okay? There was never
reports that included that the Flyers would have to give up a Tyson Foerster. This is before the extension was signed, or one of the later first-round picks.
Correct.
Those are the reports you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah. And they did not come from Philadelphia's side. I can promise you that. I can also promise you that the Minnesota did not send that communication to the Flyers, that's what they wanted, Tyson Foerster or one of the first-round picks. If in fact that is accurate, that's what Minnesota wants, and again, the Flyers don't know this. Like they have not been told this. This is just what's been circulated through the rumor mill. The Flyers wouldn't pay either price. They wouldn't pay Foerster, who they just signed to a bridge deal, and we're going to talk about that. And they wouldn't give up one of the late first-round picks for Rossi. And I think that the reason for that is because I think that Briere's goal is to use those first-round picks in a different way, other than to acquire a small middle six center. So that would not be a price that I think the Flyers would pay for Marco Rossi. Now, like I said, there is interest. It's just not, we really want this guy. It's more of a lukewarm interest. I would say that if that price came down, assuming that's what the price is, again, it has not been said to the Flyers that way, but assuming that price came down some way, and you start looking at, a second round pick and another type of player, maybe a second tier prospect kind of guy going back in the other direction, then maybe the Flyers would be interested. Otherwise, if that's the conversation, I think it's a very, very short conversation if Minnesota comes to comes to Briere and says, we want either Tyson Foerster or one of your first rounders for Marco Rossi. I don't think it happens. I think they hang up.
Can I pitch you an idea here, though? Because I've actually come around on Tyson Foerster. I came around on him at the end of the season. I think that there's a lot of value in the fact that he's very clearly on the radar with Team Canada. And that to me, I did a breakdown on my show yesterday, but like of 85 goal scored, the top 85 goal scorers last season, only 10 players who were aged 22 or younger going into last season scored 25 or more goals. So I've become a little bit more of a buyer in the stock of Tyson Foerster. The one guy who I think is signed to a bad deal, I said it at the time, and I'm pretty convinced I will end up being right. I don't like the Owen Tippett deal. I think he's too streaky of a player. If Minnesota, for whatever reason, were interested in Tippett, let's say, and they believed in the 30-35 goal upside of an Owen Tippett and that he is locked into this contract, is there any scenario where the Flyers go, all right, Tippett, like we'll go a hockey trade. Tippett for Rossi. You give Rossi that 7x7 deal, and you're getting a center.
Let me ask you a question.
Could that be in play?
So that was the next point of this whole thing, right?
Okay.
And I'm glad that you just said it.
Up the middle.
What was that, Bundy? Sorry.
You need some size up the middle. I know he's not. There's just the Flyers have enough smallish type of players. They need a big guy up the middle.
What makes you think that Marco Rossi would be worth 7x7? You know what I'm saying? Like what that's the price is the term and the length of that contract and the price, just because he had a 60-point season for another team. I mean, think about how many times in sports that guys have good seasons in obscurity on teams that nobody's aren't great teams. And Minnesota, they got off to a fantastic start last year, but they ended up right about where they belonged, which was a bubble playoff team, right? And they did get in, but they ended up right about where they should have been. And he had a 60-point season. That's great. Is that his ceiling? Is there more there?
I don't think so. I don't think it's a ceiling. Okay.
But that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
And you're willing to give that contract to that player instead of what you had. Now, look, I'm not convinced that Owen Tippett's contract's a good contract. I'm there with you on that. However,
look at us agreeing to stuff. It's good that we took like a month off. Good job.
No, but it's not that. I do want to see how Tippett plays with a different coach, because we know that there was some bad relationship there with Tippett and Tortorella, right? So before I am completely out on this Owen Tippett and that contract and that he's too streaky and it was a bad deal, I do want to see him play under a different coach. And then maybe that changes. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it stays the same, and then we sit there and go, yeah, bad deal, right?
I'm going to give you the reason why 7x7 for Rossi is not a bad idea if it's for Tippett. Okay? What's the one thing that Tippett's supposed to bring to the table? Goal scoring. Speed, goal scoring. Last season, 20 goals. Year before, 28. Year before, 27. He's 26 years old. Rossi, while small, is 3 years younger and is also coming off of a 21-goal season followed by a 24-goal season at center, even though he's small. Now, I'm not in love with the $7 million figure, but I'm going to use the logic that you have long been using here when trying to justify certain deals. The cap going up is not something that I like to burn. And looking at next season, it's not something I like to burn. But Tippett's making like 6.25. So if I'm just looking at this, again, 1-for-1 hockey trade, you have a bevy of wings. You might be able to get a center in this draft, but that remains to be seen. If a Martone falls to you at 6 and you're not sold on everybody else, like, is that another wing you're adding to the mix, right? I would be fine with the idea of, even if he's an undersized center, he probably becomes your most skilled center right now. It also takes a little bit of the pressure off of needing Jet Lashenko to make the team out of camp. Or if you draft one of these centers, it gives a little bit more leeway to allow that guy to develop for another year, maybe 2, without wasting a Matvei Michkov year. Like, I'm very committed to this belief. The number one priority this offseason, yes, goalie's important. You need a legitimate center to play with Matvei Michkov so you're not wasting years of his development. I'm like, I'm a big like just swing for the fences. Give John Tavares a 2-3 year deal at a ridiculous AAV because I want to see somebody legit play with Mishkov. But like positional need wise, I think Rossi would end up being okay. And if the kid that you draft this year, if that's who it ends up being a center, or if it's Lashenko, or if it's you go big fish hunting next year, and there are some guys that they might be interested in at center. If you have a $7 million 2C 2 years from now, Ant, like that probably looks like what a $4.5 million was a year or two ago. It's not like the Kevin Hayes contract kind of repeating itself. That's where I'd be. Like that's just where I'm at. To answer your question, and I don't think 60 is his max. I don't think that's the best that he's going to be able to do, but I could be wrong. Is that fair?
You have to believe if you want him to be your number 2 center for 7 years, you better believe that this guy's a point per game player for his career.
At $7 million though, with the cap going up,
yeah,
that might be what a 3C gets paid in 2-3 years.
Fine, but that's my point is that you don't want that type of player on your third line.
Sure.
You want your third line to be a two-way guy. He could be, but he could be higher than that too, right? I mean, they think that there's more that they think there's more there than that. Right now, you're probably going to look at next year Noah Cates would be your third line center, right?
Correct.
And they like the way that line plays together with Foerster and with Brink, and like if that's a solid third line in the NHL, and that's what you're kind of looking at, right?
Yeah.
You want to play it. You want to have a more defensive minded, group there that can score, but at the same time play both ways. I don't see Rossi as a fit here. I just don't. I think everybody falls in love with a name because it's rumored to be available, and everybody goes apeshit about it, right? On
teams. Well, in fairness, so the fan base hasn't exactly been treated to the most skilled team.
I get it. So a name gets out there, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, that's it. Like, go get that guy. What about what else is happening that nobody knows about, including me? Like, I don't know every conversation that Briere's having with every team in the league, but I do know that you would not be doing your job as a general manager in the sport if you weren't checking in on guys, even checking in on guys that you don't think are available, because you never know. Maybe you throw something at a guy and go, you know what, I wasn't going to be looking to trade that guy, but now that you bring that up, maybe we'll think about it. Like, so yeah, they checked in on Rossi. They'll probably check back in again as it gets closer to the draft. But like I said, they're not going to overpay for this guy. They don't particularly look at him as a guy that they think fits this roster like a glove.
Let me ask you this. If, in theory, right, if it were a 1-for-1 hockey trade, $7 million is the cap hit, 7 years, whatever. It's a similar enough deal to tip it. We don't have to get like into the last year or two of the deal. If the Flyers, as currently constructed, were to make that deal, would they be a better team with Rossi at center and what that allows them to do kind of around the wings? Does that help them? Would they be a better team with him than they would as currently constructed with Tippett on the wing and one fewer center? I think it does, but
if you're saying that in a vacuum, like without looking at anything else, without considering any other players, without considering what you have in your team currently, coming up through your system, whatever, or bringing anybody else new in, if it's just that's the only swap you're making, and there's nothing else,
like one for one.
Yeah, but there's nothing else. But what I'm saying is it's you're looking at it without considering the whole. You're not seeing the whole forest for the trees, right? You're looking at one very specific. Let's trade this guy for this guy, and not consider absolutely anything else. In that case, sure. Sure, is Marco Rossi a little bit better than Owen Tippett? How much is that moving the needle? If like you do nothing else, does that suddenly make the Flyers a playoff team? It doesn't. But my point is that you want better than Marco Rossi at center. Sure. That's what and the Flyers know that, and they want that. They want better than Marco Rossi at center.
So Connor McDavid's going to be a Flyer next year. Got it.
right? It's like when you went out and got Kevin Hayes, who was the best free agent at the time on the market, right? Well, just because he's the best free agent on the market that particular year doesn't mean that he's the best free agent that you could have acquired if you were patient and waited another year to see what was available. So you got to be really, really sure about that. That's my biggest thing when I look at teams and signing guys. If you sign a guy in the free agency, is he the top of the food chain or is he the top of the food chain that particular year, which makes him the third or fourth guy down the rung in a really good free agency year? So you got to be careful like that. You can't just go signing guys because, that's the best looking guy that this year we're going to go sign him because everybody says that's the best guy. No, you won't win like that. You have to make sure you get the best guy that you think is going to propel your team forward. And it's not getting a second tier guy. Paying high money for a guy doesn't mean you're getting the best player. It means that you're willing to show everybody that you're willing to pay high money for a guy, but that doesn't make him the 1C. That might make him the 2 or 3C. And that, quite frankly, is just not good enough.
I think the difference, though, there, Bundy, is that when Kevin Hayes was signed, like he had played in this league for a good long while. We all knew he wasn't that good, and Chuck was trying to do whatever the hell it was to try to make them a bubble playoff team. And maybe Chuck felt like the way to kind of increase his longevity in that role, which, let's make no mistake about it, front office executives sometimes don't make the best long-term decisions if they feel like there could be some heat on their seat. That wasn't a good signing. I don't think anybody ever thought it was really that great of a signing. And we at the time even said Hayes was probably like a 3C, and they were going to try to sell him as a 2C or a 1C, right? In the case of Rossi, he's 23. So I don't know. It's just, I think it's like a fun conversation to have, but that's okay. And there was something that came out about, just based on Rossi here and based on the idea of size. And I saw it in the comments. People talking about some different folks that size-wise would make you kind of be a little bit hesitant. And when you take a look at what the Flyers bring to the table and what a winning team has looked like over the last few years, I was very happy to see this today. But Alex Appleyard did a breakdown of the last 9 Stanley Cup winners and their size to just kind of either dispel the notion that size is important or perhaps to kind of confirm that size is important. So I want to just take a look at this really quick. And so we'll give the shout to Alex here because he did something that I certainly didn't have the patience to do. But this is from earlier today. He put up the average NHL height right now. So again, this isn't how guys play. We know JVR was a big guy, didn't play like a big player. Some guys are smaller. They play like big players. But average NHL height right now is 6 foot, 1.6 inches. D-men average around 6'2", forwards around 6'1". And then if you look at the last 9 Stanley Cup winners, red, if you're watching on YouTube, X, or Facebook, denotes that this position group is below average in terms of size. Yellow is right around average, and green is above average. So if you look at the last 9 Stanley Cup winners, you see a lot of green, especially when it comes to defensemen. And this is one of those things that we've talked about on the show. And hell, Brad Shaw said at the Carnival on this show about you can't really win a cup with so many small defensemen. I don't know, guys. When you look at this, you clearly see defensemen, 4 out of the last 6 cup winners have all been above the average NHL height. Top 4 defensemen, 5 out of the last 6 winners have been above the average height. Forwards, it's kind of the inverse. There is a little bit more of a smaller, I guess, slightly smaller than average forward core, including in the top 6. When you look at stuff like this, does it kind of reaffirm that belief? Does it kind of point to the importance of size meaning more on the blue line than anything, Bundy? When you look at it, what jumps out to you?
I don't necessarily look at the whole group when I look at size together. I'm a fan and a believer that bigger is better when you have some skill to add to it. I'm a believer in that. But I'm going back just last year. I mean, you look at the guys that play with the grit and the size on the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. A lot of them are bigger guys. Same with Vegas. I'm just going back to who'd won the Cup. Vegas. They had their bulk of their guys. They have some bigger players up front. Jack Eichel, Mark Stone. Then I'm looking at guys on Florida: Kachuk, Barkov, the bulk of those guys are heavier, bigger guys. I'm not saying your third and fourth liners, but I always feel the bigger the guy is with the skill, the better your chances are. That's just nothing against short guys. I just feel you just can't have too many of them because the weight of the playoffs is just a lot. It wears guys down. And I think you saw that with Dallas, as we talked about earlier. They kind of got worn out over the course of those two first grinds they had in the playoffs playing Colorado and Winnipeg. So there's that. But I mean, listen, it's not written in stone. It's not an exact science, but I really feel though, like to get through the 2-month tournament, you need to have that size with the skill. And they seem to be the big contributor. Look at Barkov's play the other night. That's not necessarily a play where he got the game-winning goal. I mean, he had to carry two guys on him, open up space, and then feed that pass over to Verhaeghe. That's a big-time fucking play by a hell of a hockey player, and that won them the hockey game.
It took 41 minutes. 41 minutes. That might be an all-time high for Bundy.
No, he did at the end of the show.
Bundy bomb.
If you remember that, the very end.
But I mean, I'm just saying. I don't know. I mean, yeah. And the defensemen. I mean, our defensemen bigger. You know, look at Florida's defense now. You got Ekblad. Seth Jones is a bigger statured defenseman. Nico Mikkola is a bigger guy.
Can I give the thing that goes against with Alexander Appleyard put together? And the thing that really kind of, and look, he does a lot of work there and figures it out, whatever. That's great. And it paints a picture, but does it paint the full picture? Does it put the full picture in color, right? Or is it all just looking at it in one color? And the reality of it is I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you need a big team to win. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that a smaller team can't win. But the reality of it is that the best teams in this league for several seasons now are a combination of size and speed and skill. And the teams that play a heavier game, and you don't have to be big to play a heavy game. You don't have to be tall to play a heavy game. In other words, like you could be a smaller player and still play a heavy game. That's what you need more than anything else. And so just because those guys happen that are on these championship teams or happen to be an inch smaller on average height-wise does not necessarily mean that they don't play a heavy game. Like when you look at Brady Tkachuk, now he didn't win, he's not on a Stanley Cup team, right? But you look at a guy like Brady Tkachuk. I think every team in hockey would like to have Brady Tkachuk. Is Brady Tkachuk a tall hockey player? No, he's not a tall hockey player, but he plays a damn physical game. And that's the kind of player that could complement other skill players, smaller skill players really well. He's not going to raise your average height to 6'1", but he's going to play the game like he's a big player. So to have those players as well. So when you put it into context, you can have smaller guys, but they have to play the game. Some of them have to be able to play the game in a hard way. You can't just put a bunch of guys who skate real fast in circles out there. That's not going to work in the NHL. It never has, and it never will.
So I think one of the outstanding items on our list here, and I see people asking, like Nabil here over on X, asking about number 6. Now, and I do want to add in here that, you know, there's that rumor out there that San Jose might be willing to trade out of number 2. There is the possibility that a Utah could want to move their pick at some point. You mentioned earlier on, especially as it pertained to the Rossi thing, that, you know, maybe, I don't know if you're hinting at anything, but like maybe those late first round picks could have something to do with something else. Like maybe it's part of a bigger picture move. Anytime you start to throw something out there, I start to view like Brian Windhorst here. Now, why would they do that? But like, what are you hearing so far about the draft? Has anything really changed? Has there been a player that's risen up the board across the league? You know, we knew that Higgins had kind of fallen on some boards. What do you think is currently the plan here for the Flyers? Is there a possibility? Listen, teams in the top 5 don't typically trade out. But is there a package that the Flyers could put together that would move them up from number 6 if they were absolutely in love, enthralled with a player from, I don't know, 2 to 5? Is there anything they could do? Would they do
of course. I think it's a possibility, but I think that they're also comfortable kind of hanging where they're at because there are a lot of centers in the top 10 this year, right? And I think that they look at those centers and say, we're going to get one of them, and that's going to be a key pick. I've said for months, and I will stand by the fact that they really, really love Caleb Denoyer from Moncton. I don't know if he's going to be there at 6. He may be. If he is, then I think that that's probably the direction they go. I think they're intrigued by the Roger McQueen, but at the same time, they're also concerned. Like they got to check out his medicals, and when they go up to the prospect camp thing, whatever combine they do, or the combine thing. I think that's when they'll get a real better sense of can this kid hold up, or the fact that he had 2 pretty big injuries in this past year at 18, does that really take him out of the mix? Because there's a lot of people who think that the talent that kid flashed is normally top 2-3 in a draft, but there's a big concern. If he proves to be healthy, that could be a direction that they go. I know that that they look, if you look further down the list. I mean, obviously they like Frondell too. I don't think Frondell makes it to 6. Hagens is a guy that they like him, but I think that probably he's behind the other centers. The guys that you talk about who have kind of jumped up the board a little bit, I think are Brady Martin. The only question with him is can he play center in the NHL? There are some people who think he can, some people who don't think he can. They think he's ultimately a winger. So that could give them some pause. And another winger they really like is Victor Eklund from Sweden. I wouldn't be surprised if that name starts to slide a little bit, and it's possible that it does slide out of the top 10, that maybe Danny uses those extra picks that he has to try and jump up from 22 to get to maybe 15 to get a guy like that if he's fallen to 15. So I think that their goal is going to be, although they do like some of the defensemen as well, I think that they would, if they had their druthers, would like to draft 2 centers in the first round in this year's draft.
So my Roger McQueen falling into the early teens and the Flyers getting frisky, it might live.
I mean,
I have to imagine a lot of teams. I think that a lot of teams are going to be scared away, even if they get a good read on the health. There's still part of me that thinks there are a lot of teams that are going to say, I don't know, do we want to run that risk? If he falls to like 14, 15, that could be your ballsy move that you look back on years from now and say they took a swing and it really worked out.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. It's certainly possible.
Or it's a total flop. Like, who the hell knows? Yeah. But a lot of these teams that end up building those long-term contenders, they have to make one ballsy move. That to me is like the one that makes my already big eyes pop out of my giant dome.
Yeah.
But we have to get to it, guys. What about your eyes popping out at the Tyson Foerster signing?
Oh, Jesus. We're at
we never talked about it.
It was a great move. I don't think anybody on this panel is going to say it's a bad move. $3.75 million for a guy who potted 25 goals last year. And like I mentioned earlier, 10 players aged 22 or younger at the start of the season scored 25 goals. He happens to be one of them. It's great business. In the off chance that he totally flops, 3.75 is nothing. If he outperforms and he becomes a 30, 35 goal scorer, all right, you have to pay the guy in 2 years. It seems like the best piece of business they could have possibly done. What did you think, Bundy?
I think it's a great bridge deal. I really do. I think it's fair to both sides. I think Danny did an awesome job getting that deal done. And, Tyson's provided them with some offense, some goals. I mean, he was really hot at the end of last year. He got himself up there to 25 goals. What did he finish with? Was it 25, 26?
It was 25.
25, yeah. I mean, and he, he's done some good things for the team. I've really enjoyed watching his progress and his development. I think he's done a terrific job with that. And I think that the deal is a super fair deal for both sides. I think it gives Tyson some nice financial security, but it also gives the Flyers some leverage and some flexibility to do some stuff beyond that as well, where they're not worrying about, trying to lock down a long-term deal where the numbers become polarizing to the public or to people in general. So I think they've done a really, really good job.
And let me say this. I think that the key here is credit to Tyson Foerster and his agent for accepting this as a bridge deal and saying, let me prove to you that there's more in my tank so that when the contract comes up in 2 years, then I'll get the money that I richly deserve. And for them to recognize that where the cap is going to be at that point and how much money the Flyers will be able to pay then, as opposed to what they can pay now. I think it's a great deal for the Flyers, and it's kudos to Foerster and his agent for recognizing where they fit into this plan for the Flyers and into the long run, how they can benefit down the line. A lot of times you don't get young players feeling that way. They want to get their money now. They want to go get it now. And he's basically saying, I'll take a nice salary bump. All right. You go from that entry level contract and now all of a sudden you're making $3.75 million a year. That's some good change, right? I mean, that's not peanuts. He's actually making good money. And he says, but you know what? I'm going to prove that I can make even more down the line. And I'm going to show you in the next 2 years. And I think that's great. It's also good for the Flyers in this sense. If you get to the point where there's an opportunity to get a star quality player via a trade, let's just say, maybe not this year, might be next year. Does having a guy like Foerster, who may have to be part of that, at that contract and in that situation, become more appealing to another team? I would say yes. So I think that this is all really, really good from everybody all around. I think it was a really good signing and a really good deal for the Flyers.
There's another brilliant level to it too. Like, we always talk about how the cap's going to go up. There is a non-zero chance that like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, the cap flattens again, stagnates, could even go down. So if you're Foerster, you benefit because 2 years from now, chances are we're going to still be looking at a cap going up. If God forbid something were to change, he maybe gets his money. And then a couple years after that, if the cap does flatten out, it looks like even better business. The great thing for the Flyers is they still maintain his RFA rights in 2 years, which is great. I've not yet seen a person shit on this deal. And you guys know how hard it is to find anything that has to do with the Flyers where people pretty much unanimously approve of it. Good on Tyson Foerster, good on the Flyers. Now,
I just want to point this out. Tim Harris, this goes back to the draft. He says he would take Martin at 6 and trade up for Aitchison. I will say that if the centers are gone later in the draft, the Flyers do like Aitchison as one of the defensemen. I said they like some of the other defensemen that will be there in the teens. They do like him a lot, but they still would prefer to go up front. But if the centers are gone that they like, this kid is another kid that they really like on the blue line.
Now, there was one last thing I wanted to get to here real quick. It had to do with the Flyers. Lappy, no longer the coach of the Phantoms. He gets moved to a front office role as an advisor to the hockey ops side. And I believe, if I check the receipts correctly, I believe that you reported this about a full week before everyone else. But so Laperierre, no longer the coach. Also, Reading parted ways with their head coach. Is this just a structural organizational realignment to like make sure that from the top down, system wise, like the culture you're trying to instill from the NHL down, you're just trying to pass that down? Is that why we're seeing these changes at head coach? Like, what are your thoughts there?
I'm not convinced that everyone within the organization felt that there was enough development of younger players in the AHL. Granted, Lappy didn't always have a lot of talent down there. Wasn't it was a lot of times given a bad hand to work with. But I think that the guys that the Flyers really feel could be taking that next step soon, that maybe they didn't quite get as much out of them as they would have liked with a full season in the AHL. So I think in that regard, it's more of it just let's kind of make a change there. But Lappy has been such a good soldier in this organization for so long. Whether it was in development right after he retired, was working as a player development coach, to being an assistant coach in the NHL for so long, and the head coach for 4 years at the Phantoms. He's one of those guys, and Bundy can attest to this too. Is like he's part of the Flyers family. He's part of the fabric. They weren't just going to fire him and say, "See you later." I think it was, "Hey, we have you under contract for another year. We got to pay you anyway. We're going to put you in a role where you're not going to have as much responsibility, but we're going to do right by you as a person and a family guy who has kids that are still going to school here. We're going to keep you employed. Thanks for all your service time." And we won't hear a lot from Ian Laperierre, but he will have a job for another year.
Good. And Lappy is a great guy. I've known him a long time. Well respected, well liked by everybody. It's a tough job to hold down when you're in the minors because there's such an expectation. It's probably more so than the head coach in your own team because of the big team, because you want to see how your younger guys do. So as soon as you maybe foul up one time with some of your younger players, or somebody thinks that you're not giving the younger players the ice time they want, or this guy's not playing enough, or we need to see more of that guy's development, it always falls, unfortunately, on the head coach of the American League team. And it doesn't really work out like that. But there is an onus on development. And Lappy had that job for 4 years, has been with the Flyers for several as a coach, and wish him the best. Super duper guy. And I'm sure he's going to land on his feet beyond this year somewhere if he wants to continue coaching.
I have to imagine that there's some frustration, though, Ant, because I know that it seemed like a blindside, but after they got eliminated from the playoffs, and that was disappointing, there was a reporter who asked him if he was interested in NHL coaching jobs. And he kind of froze. He kind of paused. And I think he knew that, there was probably a good answer to this. But he said, well, yeah, obviously, I would be interested in NHL coaching jobs. And then I'm not saying that had any impact and that had any reason, behind why they made this change. I don't think it probably had anything to do with it. But do you feel like there's any chance that he almost feels like he got done dirty here, that he didn't get to kind of coach out the last year in the AHL and then potentially progress next season to what his ultimate goal is, which maybe would have been like an NHL assistant coach role? Does this prevent him from being able to go after stuff like that next year? What do you think? Being an advisor now instead of being behind a bench.
No, I mean, listen, and I know people want to rip the fact that he's still there and this is cronyism and everything else. I see all the comments, and this is where people don't understand. First and foremost, he has a contract and they owe him that money. So if you're running a business and you have to pay someone $1 million, roughly is what I think that he's making as the coach, right? If you're paying someone $1 million, would you rather just pay them $1 million to do nothing, or pay them $1 million and at least provide some service, right? And so therefore you're going to let him provide the service. And why are you doing that? Because he's somebody who's been so good to the organization and been through a lot for the organization, okay? And it's the right thing to do because you don't want to show 32 other teams and potential future employees that this is how we treat somebody who's been an employee of ours for 15 years, and we're just going to kick him out the door with 1 year left on his contract, with a family that now they're going to have to move and everything else. These things matter to other people. And you can sit there as a fan and bitch and complain all you want about it. The Flyers are doing right by the person, okay? And that matters in this sport. It really does. Ian Laperierre,
you know what, though, Ant, you're right. You're right. Justice for torts. Damn right. Give that man a roll.
What he did was different.
No, I know.
Okay.
We have to listen. I know we're on like a hard out here. Before we roll, Bundy, this actually has to do with you. We didn't tell you we were going to do this, but
oh yeah,
there's something floating around about you.
Can I lead this? Can I lead this in?
Go ahead.
Sure.
So we've talked about this. We've talked about acting many times, right? You know me with my theater stuff. We know Russ has got a little bit of a character that he puts on, right? And does some acting for us sometimes. You ever watch the Russ Joy show? You see it, okay?
It's not a character.
But Bundy can do some acting too. And we found video of it. So Bundy, I want to share this because this is fantastic. Where's the sound, Russ?
I mean, look at this. There's some flexibility there. There's some dexterity. Look at this guy. Bonafide stud. Nice gait on the run.
It's getting better. It gets better.
Oh, man. Is he really? He's going up the stairs. I'm gonna mute it here. We're gonna watch this as it goes. But look at this. Was there a Yo Adrian there?
Those people thinking next
Well,
year.
hon.
What are they
Hey, everybody.
thinking?
I'm getting trained right now, right here on the Rocky Steps, Philadelphia Art Museum. Chris Therien, and it's going to be a great day, July 15th, for the Toyota Flyers Charity Classic. I have my own team, your Bundy's Charity of Flyers.
I mean, this is next level. Bundy, I gotta tell you.
I'm getting ready for the Toyota.
It's actually going to be June. What the hell's the date? The 23rd.
July 15th, isn't it?
It's not. No, I did that a few years ago. That video thing, and they just kept it. So Bill Meltzer shared it. It's going to be on. It's going to be in Conshohocken on. Let me get the date here. If you want to join my team, it will be on the 25th. Oh, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong month. Sorry. June 22nd. June 22nd. It's for the Flyers walk run ride, and you can join my team. It's on Flyers alumni on Twitter, but I'd love to have you on my team. You can run against me. You can just run with me. I'm doing the 3 mile, which is a 5K. I will not be running the whole thing 3 miles straight. I'll jog, walk a little bit, jog again, walk a little bit. So if you want to join my team, come on out and do that. I'd love to have you on it.
I think that's a good place for us to end this week.
I just want to know what those people,
right, though.
what those
Ben
people
Stiller
next to
dodgeball
you were
vibes.
thinking when you were doing the Rocky thing at the top of the steps. Like there was just a bunch of people, tourists, just standing there, right? And you're filming.
Yeah, I realized that I was doing it. I'm like thinking to myself, well, I'm not the only guy. Like everybody else was running up and then putting their arms up too. And I'm like, well, you know what the hell? I'm going to do it. I only live once, right? So I gotta do it. So I turned myself into a little Rocky training montage. The Flyers helped me do that. We made some money that year, and that's what we hope to do again this year.
That's awesome.
Oh, the
Great stuff,
headband,
Bundy.
the sunglasses was so good.
Sensational.
So good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think
Pink
that
weights.
probably that
The
yeah, the
pink
pink
hand
weights are pretty
weights.
great. They're pretty great. I think that's probably a good place to wrap for today. Listen, I know that there were some other things that we kind of wanted to get to, but that is the beauty of the next few weeks.
I will say one thing. I'll leave a little tease for everybody.
Yeah, a little tease.
I would expect you might get some assistant coach news early next week.
All right.
Ooh. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So there you go.
All right. Well,
Little
until
tease.
then, till next week, till we do the show next. This has been Snow the Goalie. You can go follow Bundy on Twitter at CTarian6. Ant is on Twitter at AntSanPhilly. I'm on Twitter at JoyOnBroad. You can find a new episode of Fightin' Words, Anthony's Phillies podcast, going out tomorrow on their YouTube channel, podcast feed, and on the Joy Media channel. I'll have an episode of the Russ Joy Show later today. I don't know what the hell we're going to talk about. We talked about Foerster yesterday, but we'll figure it out. So if you have more questions, comments, concerns about Philadelphia sports, find me over on the Russ Joy Show. Okay, guys, it was lovely chatting with you. It was even better chatting with all the fine folks in the comments on YouTube, X, and Facebook. If you're a podcast listener, you can find the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon Music, wherever you get your podcasts. But until next time, this has been Snow the Goalie, the only Flyers podcast. Have a great weekend, everybody. Talk to you soon.